your story, Jonathan.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you. My name is Jonathan Trappe, and I'm going to talk about a dream that I think you had when you were a little boy or when you were a little girl. Do you remember, and I don't mean this as a rhetorical technique, I mean, do you have this memory of playing with an individual toy helium balloon and kind of wondering at how it floats on the air, and your child's mind works, and you think, couldn't I just cluster these together, get enough of these, and wouldn't I float off and float around the room or outside at treetops and float around? And unless you have really exceptional parents, you're told that no, this is not possible. Yet the idea persists across generations. Audrey Hepburn, or this is very recently in a Dior ad, this fantasy, this dream of floating off under a cluster of toy balloons. And there's this beautiful piece of cinema, 1956, The Red Balloon. Yeah, you hear it. Some of you saw this movie 20 years ago. Some of you saw this movie 40 years ago and remember this movie. There's a young boy who finds a balloon in Paris and has adventures, a sentient balloon, and has adventures through the streets of Paris. It's a beautiful movie. And at the end, the cell is taken from him. The balloon is taken from him by bullies and destroyed. And all the balloons in Paris come to him through the streets, and he holds on to them, or they hold on to him. And he's lifted up and above the city of Paris with the Eiffel Tower in the background. And that's that magic image that so many of us had that idea. Could we just cause this to happen? And it exists in literature. If Winnie the Pooh is not literature to you, perhaps we cannot be friends. Go back to Chomsky or Mailer, but I'll take Winnie the Pooh and how he tried to get to honey. Do you guys remember this? Read it to your children? Yeah, people remember. He's trying to get to the honey, and he floats up, and importantly, he has to figure out how to get back down. And he decides that maybe these are the wrong sort of bees, and therefore the wrong sort of honey, and he does find a way to get back down. He shoots out the cell or has the cell shot out. But we have our epic scale dreamers at Pixar recently. We have Pixarians here who imagine if you could just get millions of these cells, could you cause something really grand to lift off? Just completely impossible, right? So how do you do this? This is how I started, with one cell, one balloon in my backyard. And it's amazing what a credit card and the internet will do. We got one balloon, and tested it in my backyard. And this is my girlfriend, and she says she's throwing the balloon. I argue she let go just in time. You know, one balloon had a reasonable amount of lift. And what I do, I'm a technical project manager at Accenture, a big IT consulting firm. I'm responsible for delivery and execution, less so for dreaming, frankly. And I'm sitting at my workplace thinking, how are we going to really cause this to happen in the real world? In that one of the early images you saw the woman floating off, am I going to have muscle failure and let go of these cells and fall and perish? And I'm thinking about it, and I'm sitting in my chair, and I said, we could cause this to fly. The chair that I'm in right now, it's a steel case Uno. We could make this fly. And initially it didn't work. But we had backups, additional cells that we added and caused that chair to fly, just the chair. You see, we're scaling up. One cell, a small cluster. If you were in my workplace that day and looked out the 5th floor window, that's what you would have seen. It doesn't belong to me, actually, that chair. I was on a government, it actually belongs to the great state of North Carolina. But what if we're successful? What if I get this to lift off with enough of these cells and I float away? Then what? Will I perish in the attempt? We're talking about thin air, high altitude, potentially, right? Will I get arrested when I land? Will I perish and get arrested? That would be a bad day, right? First you perish, then you get arrested. That's a bad day. So, and more importantly than that, so this is a very light topic. But more importantly than that, do no harm, right? Am I going to put anybody else at risk? Those we share the sky with and those below me. So let's take care of those things. I went to flight school in Albuquerque, New Mexico, the mecca of ballooning, and learned to fly a hot air balloon. Those toy balloons are not a hot air balloon. With a hot air balloon, you burn a fuel, like propane, to make the envelope balloon warm and less dense than the comparatively cold surrounding air, and you're buoyed up, you float. And the outcome of this flight school is that magic plastic card from our Federal Aviation Administration there. And on the back of it, it says this. This is my rating. Private pilot, lighter than air, free balloon. I'm legal to fly a balloon system. There's a problem. Limited to hot air balloons with airborne heater. I'm not trying to fly a hot air balloon. I went to flight school so I could fly these balloons. Airborne heater, a way of making heat in the air, like burning a fuel, propane. I don't have any fuel if I'm flying toy balloons, nothing conventional anyway. So this is an incredibly rare aircraft. That right there, notice that it's not open, there's no fire going up. This is a giant helium balloon. Nothing like, to give you an idea, from the time that we flew this aircraft, the last one that had flown in my state was about 20, 25 years before. And we take a couple of these cells to altitude because we want to understand what happens. As you climb, atmospheric pressure decreases, the ideal gas law, the balloon expands, and it will fail somewhere. Where? 5,000 feet, 10,000 feet? Is it going to fail while we're in flight? And is there going to be a cascading effect? No hot air. This is not hot air. Helium. Banks and it's this truck full of helium to get that system off the ground. And we enter into flight with this more tested, more standard gas balloon and the individual cells. And we test them. What happens? What happens when we intentionally cause one to fail? So I pull it down to me and I take a knife and I stab the balloon to cause it to rupture, to understand, does my rate of climb do this or does it do this? And I got rid of that limitation through that additional. There is no more. So now I can fly any balloon system, any lighter than air free balloon. And the FAA was silent as to what that was. And this is the gear layout for that flight. The steel case Uno, ballast, balloons, everything we're going to need to fly that system. And it took about a year, to get to this point on the airfield where we're rigging the balloon, the chaircraft. Thank you for giving me that, I appreciate that. On the airfield the day before the flight, so we can come back that night, and in the night, when the winds are calm, inflate this towering cluster of helium balloons and attach it to the chair. It's my girlfriend reading the checklist of all the equipment that we have, and she has my full attention. I am rapt. All she ever needs to do to get my full attention is to read me a gas balloon checklist. She argues this was the last time she had my full attention. And we are positively buoyant, and I mean that literally and perhaps personally. I'm off the ground here, transponder in the back. And I have liftoff, 10 feet, 20 feet, 25, 30. And at 35 feet, I turn around and I wave to the crew that helped me stand this aircraft, and I say, "See you on the other side," which probably wasn't the best thing to say, actually. It had a tone of finality to it that wasn't intended. "I'll see you in an hour," that would be okay. On the other side implies things that weren't intended as I floated off, in this instance, into the sunrise. And my friend all the way to the right, right after this was taken, reached to my girlfriend in the center, and you see her hands on her hips. He says, we'll get him back. We flew that chair. Yeah. I can show you one of the happiest moments of my life. And it's this right here. And it's on that airfield in that early morning. My friend is checking the carabiner, making sure it's locked, and my girlfriend is telling me to come back. And crew that we had on the airfield helping us build that system is looking on. Is this about flying an office chair? Yeah. It's not. It's about dreams and inspiration and accomplishing what we set out to do. That day, 4 hours, 15,000 feet over North Carolina. Could have flown longer, but if you're familiar with where North Carolina is in relation to the Atlantic Ocean, I made the decision to put it down. I'm going to step out of my presentation for a second and come back to that. In your deck of cards that you got, there's a steel case card in here, and there's a prize that's given away, which is 2 of these steel case chairs. I did not win the steel case chairs, but my girlfriend did. 2 of them. It's like the universe is trying to tell me something, and I'm not sure what it is. And what more can we do? What else can we cause to come into fruition or existence? We took this system, and I retired that chair. It's retired undefeated. It was extremely hard to stay in for 4 hours. And I got this harness bit with this webbing. And we flew it under this towering cluster of toy balloons to 18,000 feet, 17,930 if the FAA asks, okay? About 18,000 feet, oxygen, transponder, aircraft radios, crew radios. And what more can be done? What more can we be done? I'm not the first one to fly one of these. Guy in 1937 did it. Nobody has launched in the daytime and survived the night and greeted the sun from the sky the following morning. And if you're going to do more with these, you have to be able to survive the night. And so when the conditions were right, I entered into free flight, and I flew into the sunset and allowed the sun to set. That's me with my feet kicking free as the sun is going down. This is the picture my card at EG is taken from. This is a capture as I'm videoing myself. It's not a portrait. I'm videoing myself for documentary purposes to say how much ballast I have left, water that I can drop. If I start descending, I have to be able to climb again. You can't land at night. It's unlikely to be successful. You can't see obstacles. And right here, I am not confident, which I thought was funny that EG made the card based off this moment, because I am not confident at this moment, because nobody had done it. Nobody had flown through the night and survived the night. And I'm not sure I'm going to live through that night. And we did. I did. We flew through the night, set a world record for the longest flight, and saw the sunrise in the sky. It was about a 50-degree temperature swing from daytime on the ground to nighttime aloft, and it was a very introspective time, hour after hour of silence in complete darkness at 8,000 feet that time. And this is one of the outcomes, and I'm very proud of this bit. Air and Space, the Smithsonian's Air and Space. It's Smithsonian's, our country's national museum. And that's another one that I have forever, that little bit there. And what more can be done? We had to approach the FAA to get registration for this system. And we're flying here in Mexico, in the open skies. And when I was talking earlier, I was saying about the dream of flight, and I meant that as a fantasy, right? But then there's the literal dream of flight. When most of us dream of flying, we don't think of a little commuter aircraft and looking out the side. We imagine ourselves, most of us, when you dream of flying, floating at treetops and looking down in the world in complete silence. And that's the way I fly. There's no props, rotors, jets, no burner from a hot air balloon. I'm out in the open sky with nothing between me and the sky, and it feels like you're part of the sky. I can feel it on my skin. I breathe it in. And there's nothing supporting me besides these toy balloons. When I started buying quantity, I had to sign a pretty serious waiver. And this session, this opening session at EG is called Ups and Downs. And there's, this is appropriate, yeah? Ups and downs on every flight. And it's some real interesting ones on the downside. This flight was supposed to be about 10 hours. After 8 hours, it ended when I took small arms fire from the surface, got shot at, and they blew out multiple cells simultaneously, and which initiated a very sharp descent into a epic scale cactus field in Mexico. And I could hear the gunman coming through the underbrush, and I fired my EPIRB, my satellite-based emergency messenger beacon, and which alerted the United States Air Force, which contacted the Mexican authorities, which initiated a military response. I'm just about the most peaceful aircraft out there. I have no fuel. I can cause so little harm. The most dangerous thing on the aircraft is me if I fall, but any manned aircraft is going to have a man that could fall. Anything else is very hard to hurt anybody else by. And then there is a classic challenge that has called to aviators for generations, since long before you or I were born. And notice the white cliffs here, and notice the balloon, the first crossing 225 years ago, and the white cliffs.
Yesterday, 36-year-old Jonathan Trappe of Raleigh, North Carolina, floated across the English Channel powered only by a colorful cluster of helium-filled balloons, the kind of cluster you might see a clown hold. Almost refreshingly, Mr. Trappe didn't float through the sky to call attention to any good cause. He did it for fun. Didn't you have this dream, he asked reporters, grabbing onto a bunch of toy balloons and floating off? I think it's something that's shared across cultures and across borders, just this wonderful fantasy of grabbing onto toy balloons and floating into open space. You're listening to NPR News.
Thanks, Scott. And what more can be done? Our professional dreamers at Pixar approached us and said, could you fly a house? And we explained to them, yeah, we can fly a house. And we told them how much it would cost. And they said, can you fly something smaller? If you've seen the film, it's a delightful film. Carl Fredricksen in his chair, captured from the film, and they provided us rotations of what that chair looked like. Y'all know where this is going, don't you? And we created the chair out of carbon fiber and upholstered it and approached the FAA. This went to the head of the FAA, actually, and we caused it to fly, in this instance at Dolphin Stadium, under a towering cluster of toy balloons, tethered in that instance, though we did fly it to 5,000 feet. Yet that challenge remains. Can you fly a house? I make this assertion that you can fly a house. And last month, in the deserts of Southern California, we built a house and said, what if we get hundreds of these cells, okay, and take hundreds of tanks of helium? Could we cause this house to fly? And as sun rises, maybe 100 people out at that airfield throughout the night, filling those cells and causing this aircraft to come into existence. As you look out through the house up at the balloons above you, and we got liftoff right there. This is me. And that is not animation. And, oops, getting ahead of myself. Is this about flying a house? You know it kind of is. It's awesome. And what I was very proud of is this is a dream, not the house bit, mind you, but this dream of floating off under toy balloons is a fantasy that so many of us have had. And we caused it to come into existence. And I'm going to we were asked, what are you aching to do next? At the northern end of the Golden Gate Bridge, there's a landing, and there's a children's museum there that's open, an open enough piece of land to assemble a cluster of balloons. And to float out past the Golden Gate Bridge, over the San Francisco Bay, reaching Emeryville, past the San Francisco skyline, Alcatraz, Angel Island, over Emeryville, over Mount Diablo, over the agricultural core of the Central Valley, to the string of national parks on the east part of the great state of of California. North Carolina, I'm getting ahead of myself. And up and over the Sierra Nevadas and into the heart of America is what we're thinking, is what we're dreaming of. I'm going to close on this bit because I thought you might dig it. If you go to the FAA's website and look up November 878 Uniform Papa, Carl Fredricksen is 78 and Russell is 8 years old, you will find this in the registration. Model Carl Fredrickson's. This is his aircraft, and the FAA did issue us registration and airworthiness for the aircraft. Experimental manned-free balloon. To fly the channel, we had to approach the Civil Aviation Authority in France, and they were very laissez-faire about it. They're French. The Brits were not laissez-faire about it. They said, your aircraft is sub-ICAO. Okay, your pilot's license, no problem. But your aircraft, no, it does not qualify. You would need an exemption to fly here. And I said, can I have an exemption? And they said, okay. And they issued that document right there. Air Navigation Order, Jonathan Trapp's Flying Chair. And with that, I'm going to close on this, because I said something that, at the beginning that led into this moment. What we're left with, this is our ephemeral moments. They're gone once we fly. And what we're left with is this, not the pictures, but this, when we're talking to each other like at EG right now. And I said that unless your parents were exceptional, they would have told you that it's impossible. I think this room of people will not tell their children that it's impossible. And I've just been, it's been a real pleasure to have the opportunity to come in and share that with you. So with that, guys, thank you. Thank you very much.